Welcome to this episode of the People Dividend Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Horne, and I am absolutely thrilled about today's speaker, Mark Murphy, and today's topic because we're going to explore a subject that is near and dear to, I'm going to venture and say, most of us, and that's what does it take to build a winning team? We haven't figured out the formula. Mark is going to guide us on that. But I'm going to give you a spoiler alert because I think something's interesting that comes out of this. Mark's going to offer that it's not all about forcing everyone to blend in. You know, too many of us have been to those events where everybody puts on the same t-shirt and they call it a team. But what Mark's going to offer is how do we embrace what makes each person unique? So Mark is a best-selling author, a New York Times best-selling author, a leadership expert. His work has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Harvard Business Review, Forbes, and his latest book, Team Players, the 5 Critical Roles You Need to Build a Winning Team, introduces a groundbreaking framework that shows how recognizing distinct roles, not just pushing for harmony, leads to real innovation and results. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. It's just a pleasure to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. Mark, your new book challenges the traditional idea that great teams are all about harmony. And I think for some in today's environment, they don't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about differences so much. So, but why is that a myth that it's all about harmony? And what inspired you to write Team Players?
So I'll take that second question first. So one of my previous books was called Hiring for Attitude. And the big aha of that book was that when new hires fail, 89% of the time it's for attitudinal reasons. It's not for skills reasons. And so that book was all about, okay, well, how do you find the right attitudes? And after that book came out, we kept working and doing research and helping organizations with it. One thing started to become kind of obvious as we're working with teams that have, ostensibly hired the right attitudes. Over and over again, these most successful teams seem to have certain roles fulfilled on those teams. That was, for example, if you look at a really great team, that team has somebody who is willing to make a decision. I mean, we've all sat in those meetings or on teams where the group can't decide. Well, I don't know. Let's get more data. Let's keep thinking about it. Let's table that conversation till another time. And okay, well, that's maddening. That sounds horrible. Great teams always had somebody that would keep the group on task. And so we ended up calling that person a stabilizer. They're like the taskmaster, like, hey, we got deadlines and we got to-dos. They always had some people, usually more than one, who was like the roll up the sleeves doer person. And they're like, listen, I don't want to be in charge. Just give me direction. Tell me what to do. Like, okay. Every group had somebody who was like kind of a peacemaker. Every group had somebody who would bring some crazy out of the box ideas. And over again, there were these same basic functions. We just ended up calling them roles that got fulfilled in the teams. And we said, well, why is that the case? Why is that the major separator? And you see ineffective teams and they were missing somebody who could make decisions, or they just lacked the creativity. They didn't have that big out of the box person, or their harmony was terrible. And over, what became clear was that the best teams, kind of like a football team or a basketball team or an orchestra or a rock band, they are not all the same. While everybody may get along, may be great friends, maybe not. Turns out it doesn't really matter, but everybody had a distinct role to play. If you look at an NFL team, you got people that weigh 350 pounds, you got people that weigh 220. You got some that are 6'5", some that are 5'7", some run fast, some lift heavy things. And everybody they're different body types, they're different personalities. They are playing radically distinct and different roles. And it turns out that business is the one area where we have eschewed all of that insight. Every other facet in life, pretty much, you look at and you go, okay, well, they're playing off of differences. They're bringing in weird collections of people to do distinct and different things with all different talents and abilities. But business is the one time we stuff people into a room and go, well, okay, everybody has to get along. Let's find that harmony. Let's kind of gel into this cohesive whole.
I see.
And every place else, it's like, no, let's let your differences fly. You be you. My job as the leader of the team is just kind of to find the right group of you and put you in the right spots. But I don't need you all to be the same. In fact, the more of these differences I have, usually the better off I'm going to be.
And do you think it's more difficult or less difficult to talk about these issues in early 2026 than it was 2 years ago?
One of the things I've been finding is that one part of this that really resonates with people that actually makes it easier to talk about is that number one, given kind of the current state of things, there are plenty of organizations where they're like, listen, we're not even really allowed to talk about like, classic team building where everybody gets along. We kind of have to let people, they may fit into a role that isn't part of the team harmony. Like seems to be a little less energy for the team harmony thing at the moment. And so one thing that people, especially people that are like, I'm not a classic team player type, because usually when people say team player, what they mean is extroverted, high on gregariousness, they're very usually fairly outgoing, pretty sociable, affiliative driven, and there are plenty of introverts who are like, listen, I just want to like do some stuff, I just want to get some work done. Or they're innovative people that are like, I kind of want to just be my bring some crazy ideas, and sometimes that annoys people. So the people that don't feel like they are the quote unquote classic team player actually sometimes feel like, yeah, this actually gives me license to kind of be more of my authentic self. And hopefully I can find a way to make that work in a team and get a team that recognizes that the unique thing I bring actually has some value.
Right. And as a coach and consultant and a recovering HR executive, what I often counseled my clients with, particularly internal clients, is that if you describe someone as not being a team player, it can really be a kiss of death to the person's career. And by the way, that's not really anchored in any behavior, not a team player. It's not descriptive at all. And I think that's in part why your book is so helpful. So let me make sure that I've got the 5 roles right. I've got director, achiever, stabilizer, harmonizer, and trailblazer. So I think about Dash to the T if I was in Boston or something, but I think about Dash because it has an acceleration component, director, achiever, stabilizer, harmonizer. I need those roles. And trailblazer, someone to take me in a new direction. So that's why I think about Dash
Mhm.
to the T.
Yeah, and that's a great way to think about it. Those are the 5 roles. And again, it's, people, they'll hear the names of the roles and they're like, oh yeah, that one sounds like me. Or that one, ooh, that one does not sound like me. People sometimes have kind of, visceral reactions to, yeah, I think I'm that one there.
Mark, I loved your illustration with sports teams and comparing it to the NFL. We've all been NFL crazy lately. And yet, I've often told my clients because when I've asked them when it comes to an effective team, what comes to mind, and people often raise the idea of sports teams. As you and I know, I mean, business teams are quite unlike sports teams in many ways for lots of different reasons that don't have to be. They don't have a goal, they don't have a mission, they don't have a leader, they don't have a coach. And maybe that's what you're saying with these 5 roles is that, figure it out. I mean, this is what makes it work.
I use that as similar kind of example when people talk about sports teams, and I'm like, well, one of the things you have to remember is that like on sports teams, they actually spend money on coaching and leaders. Like the offensive line, there may be 5 guys. Guess what? They have their own coach. The quarterback's room has like 3 people. Nope, there's a quarterback's coach. Like, we actually invest in stuff with teams. Like maybe there's a lesson there. But even without the sports
Mark,
metaphors,
that's so true. I just want to, I'll interrupt very briefly, and I apologize for doing that, but you
no,
remind
no.
me of the corollary that I often use as you're suggesting, is that why I tell people that sports teams are bad metaphors for business teams is that sports teams are 95% practice and 5% game, or maybe it's even different, where business teams are mostly about performance and less about practice. So I love your illustration, Mark, around, every 3 or 4 individuals might have a coach or coach in their corner, or maybe a one-on-one coach if you're the quarterback or you're the general manager. Wonderful illustration, Mark. Thank you so much for making those ideas come alive.
Well, and it's funny because even if we take out the sports metaphors, Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, at one point he described his executive team. He called it a legion of superheroes. And he said,
Mhm.
I like to think of our SLT, their senior leadership team, as each leader comes with a unique superpower to contribute for the common good. And I'm like, great, choose that one. It's like if somebody doesn't like sports metaphors, well, let's use a symphony orchestra. Symphony orchestra, there are different roles. The temperament of your first violinist is quite a bit different than the temperament of your principal tuba, which is quite a bit different than the principal of your French horns, which is quite a bit different than your timpanist. Or use Nadella's. I like to think of it as a legion of superheroes where each one of the people on the team has a different superpower. Cool. Honestly, at this point, I'm like, listen, choose your metaphor. It doesn't matter to me. But what each of these speak to is that the best teams really are kind of this collection of differences. Now, you can't just put any old random people in a room. I mean, you still got to align them and direct them and all that. But if we understand that for a team to be effective, you need kind of a tougher decision maker. You need a bit of a taskmaster. You need somebody with a bit of creativity. You need somebody that's willing to roll up their sleeves and do work. You need somebody that's willing to play a bit of peacemaker. If you get that, then you can assemble all sorts of differences. And I promise that there are different, every organization with different personalities, right? People want to play different roles in a team. That's cool. And that's one of the things I think is kind of neat about it is that you really, everybody doesn't look the same. Everybody doesn't act the same. There is a place for, if everybody's committed to the overall goal, there is many different ways to help the team hit that goal by still being you, still playing your, getting your unique superpower in Nadella's terminology, or, that you got to have a violinist. You need a trumpet. You need a tuba. You need a timpani. You need a cello. Whatever. You need these different pieces to actually make the whole thing work.
Yes, and these 5 roles, I don't think we can take them for granted, which is why a lot of team building is a waste of time. I'm not going to go so far as to say, the overall objective of a lot of team building in organizations is harmony, but I think that's a good measure of it. And I love what you were saying about the Microsoft CEO example, because, if you have a commitment to a purpose, you foster that, then you look for different yet complementary skill sets, as someone described a long time ago. And then along with some disciplined processes, and you have the beginnings of real effective teamwork. But you do need to be clear on roles. You need to have a compelling vision that people buy into, and you've got to have some discipline around your process.
And yeah, and that's a great point because it's not enough to just say, we need differences on the team. One of the things we found is that you really have to have what is known, sometimes technically as reciprocal affirmation.
Mhm.
Essentially, we have to appreciate that these roles, each one of these roles actually brings something of value. An exercise I like to do with groups sometimes is go, okay, listen, here are the 5 roles. Now, what I'd like you to do is think about a time in your career, whether it's here or someplace else, where there was a person on that team who really played the stabilizer. And I want you to talk about what value did that bring to the team? How was that beneficial? Talk about a stabilizer. And we go as an achiever. We go through each of the 5 roles. And what people start to realize as they share their examples is, you know what? This team I was on previously, it worked because somebody was willing to make the tough decision, a director, or because we had somebody that was just tirelessly doing mountains of work, or we had somebody that would step in and, smooth over some ruffled feathers from time to time. And as they start to really reflect on and appreciate how each of these 5 roles has made a difference, what you start to hear are stories that sound like, an NFL quarterback talking about how much he loves his offensive line. And you're like, the unsung heroes, right? And it's like, well, what we're really doing is we're learning to appreciate how these different roles have actually made a contribution. And then as the group starts to formalize, like, listen, there is a part in every meeting where, or some meetings at least, where I need to hear some, if I'm the director, I need to hear from some Trailblazer ideas. We need some out of the box thinking now. put our, that stance on for a moment. Let's put the Trailblazer mask on. And now we actually have to dedicate. Let's take 10 minutes. Let's go through that. Or, you know what? It's coming time. We got to deal with some to dos. And we have to structure it a bit so that we're not only affirming and recognizing the importance of these roles, but also kind of hardwiring this, actually to your point, having process in our groups that this isn't just something else we can talk about and then it just goes by the wayside, but there has to be a discipline around it. Otherwise, we don't get the full benefit of it.
And Mark, are these roles, are they hardwired into our DNA, or are they skills that I can learn? And if I see that one of these roles is deficient or absent in my team, I can develop the skills in someone, or I develop the skills in myself in order to attend to that particular role?
Yes. So they are absolutely switchable and developable within reason. So what that means is, so for example, sometimes people will ask me, well, how does this, these roles, how do they compare to like a DISC or Myers-Briggs or Personalis or, whatever? And my answer is they kind of don't. For example, you can be a director. You can be somebody who makes tough decisions on a team, but you can do that as an introvert or you could do that as an extrovert. There is no hard or fast rule that it's more about the function you're fulfilling than it is your personality type. Now, that being said, stabilizers and trailblazers do tend to have difficulty adopting the other's role. Somebody who loves being the trailblazer with the big out of the box innovative ideas has difficulty really fulfilling the functions of a stabilizer at a high level for a long period of time. So, for example, at Leadership IQ, my company, I am far more of a trailblazer than I am a stabilizer. And so, I had to hire somebody who was a stabilizer par excellence, and she is fantastic. I could step in for a few days, maybe even a week if I had to. Let's say she was out for some reason. And I'm like, all right, well, I got to play this role while she's not here. Okay, yeah, I can suck it up and I can do that for a bit. Now, if you told me I had to do that every day for the next year, that would get a little tiresome and stressful for me, and vice versa. And so some roles are easier to switch in and out of than others. So directors and trailblazers, they can switch pretty easily. Stabilizers and achievers, they can switch pretty easily. So the good news is that you don't have to play just one role. And in fact, you may find that depending on the team you're on, most people are on multiple teams, that they may fulfill a different role. Like, listen, I may not be the world's best director. I may not be the world's best decision maker, but you know what? Compared to everybody else in this room, okay, I'm what we've got. And so I'm going to play that role in this particular group. But then if I'm in another group where there is somebody who is doing that brilliantly, I'm like, okay, well, now I can just step into my achiever role where I'm actually more comfortable. And, that's great. So there is a bit of flexing that any team can do. And of course, if you're on a team of 3 people, yeah, odds are, you're all wearing multiple hats probably.
Well, that's great, Mark. And just before we get into a wrap up question or two, if my audience wants to get in touch with you and your work, I mean, where would they turn? Where would they look?
Yeah, if you go to leadershipiq.com, you can find info about all my books there. There's also a quizzes tab on our website. There's a team players tab, but there's a quizzes tab. And there's a bunch of free quizzes on there, but one of them is a team players quiz. And so there's some fun free resources you can use with your team that, like, hey, listen, folks, let's just kind of go through and take a quick assessment to see which one of our natural states we come out as. It's a great way to kind of, do a discussion point, great way to tee up the ideas behind it.
Well, it's great. I mean, another gem from best-selling New York Times best-selling author and Mark Murphy, media appearances, CBS News, NPR. I really think that Mark's current book, this new book, Team Players, you'll have a lot to learn from it if you want to know more about building high-performing teams. And Mark, if you were just to leave our listeners with one piece of advice to carry through 2026 regarding having these brilliant Dash T teams, What would it be?
Be brutally honest with yourself about what parts of the team, what roles you love to fulfill, and which ones you do not. Because once you are honest with yourself about, where you shine, where your comparative advantage is, and where it's not, it puts you in a position where you get to do what you love to do and do best, but also it instantly identifies for you what things you're missing on your team. And it's usually those pieces that if you ask somebody else on the team who wants to play this role, somebody will step up and they will love it. Even if you don't love it, they will love it. And it makes your job as the team leader infinitely easier.
Well, that's great. Mark, it's been such a genuine pleasure to have you on the show. And I'm going to leave a question for our listeners, which is, which of these five roles do you see yourself playing on your own team? So think about that. It's a little food for thought between this episode and the next time you tune into the People Dividend podcast. And in the meantime, I encourage you to subscribe, leave a review, tell everyone how you enjoyed this episode. So, Mark, again, thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
And until the next episode of the People Dividend, stay well.